I'm Lisa McGrory. I'm the executive director of the Bozeman Film Society, and we're really excited to have you here this evening. This is the third year that the Bozeman Film Society has received a grant to do this Science on Screen program, but it's the first time that we've been able to officially participate in the National Evening of Science on Screen. Yay! So the National Evening is the showcase event of the nationwide Science on Screen Grant Initiative, which is funded by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and administered by the Coolidge Theater in Boston, Massachusetts. At this exact moment, there are 27 other theaters around the nation that are gathering to watch a movie together and hear distinguished science experts in a variety of fields give presentations related to the film that they've just watched. Right now in Bellingham, Washington, they are pairing the 2015 film Ex Machina with a discussion on artificial intelligence as it relates to the self-driving car, which we all know needs some reworking. And in just a few hours, I don't know what the time change is, but in Honolulu, they are screening Dr. Strangelove, followed by a discussion on the all-too-real recent Hawaii missile scare and current threats of nuclear war. Right here at the Ellen Theater, we are getting ready for the 1984 cult classic, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension! If you've never seen the movie, prepare to have your life changed. If you have seen it, then you'll understand why this evening's guest speaker is such a devoted fan. To reveal a bit more on what you're about to experience, please welcome to the stage internationally distinguished science writer, bon vivant, and devoted uncle, David Quammen.
Thanks, Lisa. Hello, friends and neighbors, and thanks for coming out tonight. What a good thing this is. As Lisa said, this movie was made in 1984. It was a cult classic. Everybody who walked into this movie in 1984 loved it, all 14 of us. But it has endured. And so it's back. And so I'm just going to say a couple of things beforehand, and then afterwards we will have a conversation. Myself and my two very smart young nieces, and you, the smart, not so young audience, we'll have a conversation about some of the science issues, the serious and less serious science issues that this movie presents. Let me just alert you to a couple of things beforehand. First of all, we will have, and I've told a few people about this already, we will have a door prize. I'm not calling it a competition. But a door prize game. At the end, we will invite you to give your answers to a very simple but profound question that I'm going to give you right now. And those of you who want to, and I hope that will be plenty, will come down here to this little microphone at the end of our conversation and give us your answer to this question. And whoever by acclaim gives the best answer will win the fabulous, priceless packet of prizes inside this black box. So that's at the end. So pay attention, please, for a second. The simple but profound question is this: what is the meaning of the watermelon? Okay? What is the meaning of the watermelon? That's the door prize quiz question. All forms of answers welcome, but we'll, by acclaim, decide on the best. Secondly, watch for the nightclub scene. I think it's the third major scene in the movie, sometimes called the iconic nightclub scene, a wonderful scene that plays with us, plays with our expectations, sort of begins the the rhythm of interrupted expectations, but it's a wonderful scene. The nightclub rock and roll scene. And when you watch that, be aware that Buckaroo himself, this brain surgeon, particle physicist, martial arts, rock and roll, superhero comic book star, played by Peter Weller, he is not only playing the guitar, but he is playing that trumpet himself. Peter Weller is playing the trumpet himself. He, it turns out, was a trumpet player in college. And just one final thing, because we have kids here tonight, we have some kids here tonight. There are one or two places in the movie where the talk gets a little bit racy. So we apologize for that. Nothing visual, just talk. So our younger neighbors and friends and family members here, you don't need to close your eyes for anything in this movie, but occasionally you'll need to do earmuffs. You'll need to do earmuffs, maybe. Although, you know, I don't think there's anything that's remotely going to shock a young person of the early 21st century. Okay, the rest of it can wait. Let's enjoy this movie. Thank you for being here. Okay. All right, let's have a conversation. And we won't keep anybody up too late tonight. It's a school night, it's a work night. We won't go on too long. But we do want to have a little bit of a conversation about science on screen, because that's what this night is about. So I'm going to do the world's fastest PowerPoint to sort of lay out a couple of ideas and thoughts that we can then, you call it a prologue to our conversation. And I'll go on for 4 minutes maybe. And then we'll bring my nieces out and we'll have a conversation, all of us. Science on screen, and this world of 8s and 10s. And so how often do you get to see science on screen? Does Hollywood ever really give us science on screen? Does Hollywood give us movies about people like Barbara McClintock, who studied maize, corn, planting it in fields and looking at the kernels and making discoveries in genetics that led her to the Nobel Prize at the age of 84? No, they don't make movies about that. Do they make movies about people like Lynn Margulis, who discovered amazing things about the origins of complex life on Earth? No, they don't make movies about that. I love those two ladies because they're part of my current book project. Do they make movies about people like Herman Minkowski? No, they don't. Do they make movies about people like Diane Fossey? No. Oh, actually, yes, they do. They do, because she studied gorillas, and her story was just a little bit more dramatizable. Do they make movies about people like Katherine Johnson? You would think not. By the way, all of these photographs I've plucked from the web. They're low resolution. Excuse me for that. Don't do this at home. I didn't pay for rights on any of these things. I wouldn't do it if I were lecturing for pay. But these are captured from the web. Movies about people like Katherine Johnson. Well, yes, in fact, they do, which is good. Is there science? Katherine Johnson, a great mathematician doing engineering for NASA. Was that science on screen? Well, at least it was math and engineering on screen. And then you go back to some of the great classics, like The Fly, and Andre Delambre, the scientist who had a machine that was going to break down creatures into molecules and send them through space and be captured in another machine. Unfortunately, a fly got in there with him. That was the old original version. The newer version was with the great Jeff Goldblum. And then there are all these other things that we thought about when Lisa McGrory and her committee and Lily and Mae and their mother, Katie, and we all talked about science on screen. What would that be? What would be the right movie? And we thought about some of the greats, including This one, 2001, starred in by an actor named Kerr Dulia, who disappeared, or Kerr Dulé, disappeared immediately afterwards because nobody could pronounce his name. And of course, the Alien series and other more recent movies that had at least science fiction on screen. It's very rare to find science on screen, and usually what we end up with is science fiction, some very interesting and profound and seemingly profound movies. Some of the questions that I'll raise to you tonight will fall in the category of, can somebody please explain to me? And that certainly applies to this movie. One of my favorites that has science and has science fiction was this one, but we decided not to use any of those. We decided not to use this one close to my own heart, because it's about infectious diseases, and it actually does contain some science, true science, in the role that's played by Elliot Gould, where this scientist goes off to his laboratory to try and identify this new emerging virus that's killing people all over the world, sends his staff home, isolates that virus, and identifies that virus so that the movie can be resolved. It's a movie that is closer to science, partly because it has a scientific advisor, this fellow, who the character of Ian Sussman, whoops, boom, now we're jumping too far. Let's go back. There's a delay here. Stefan, maybe you can help me. There we go. Okay, I won't bounce back anymore. This character is probably based on this character who was the scientific advisor to that film. So at least they got the virology very, very accurately. And then we come to the question of dimensions and how many dimensions there are. And string theory, which is a form of quantum gravity theory, tells us that there actually are 10 dimensions in our universe. And I have relied on this fellow, Jason Louv, who has a wonderful presentation online about those 10 dimensions. The first, which is obvious, of course, is the single-dimensioned length, and you know all these things. Second dimension is height. Third dimension is depth. Fourth dimension is time. Where did that idea come from? Well, it came from the special theory of relativity propounded by this fellow in 1905. And although he was a true scientist, he became incorporated into the popular culture. People grabbed onto him and cartooned him and embraced him and made him the world's most famous scientist for a period of years. He eventually got pretty sick of that. But the fact is that the idea that special relativity involved a fourth dimension, the dimension of time, was explicated by this guy, Hermann Minkowski, I mentioned earlier, in 1907. He was one of Einstein's teachers in Zurich, but in 1907, he was the one who said, wait a minute, the theory of special relativity essentially is saying that there are 4 dimensions, and the fourth dimension is time. We should call that space-time, Hermann Minkowski. And of course, there's a fifth dimension. They had a lot of great hits in the late 60s. The sixth dimension is the plane of all possible worlds with the same start conditions. Seventh, all possible worlds with different start conditions. And then we come to where we have been all evening, in the 8th dimension. And one of the wonderful things about this movie, I think, is that where do these aliens come from? Do they come from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? No, they come from nearby. They come from Planet 10 in our own solar system, from Planet 10 to Grover's Mill, New Jersey. But where is Planet 10? Planet 10 is a real thing, we think. We have 8 planets. We had 9 planets. We had 9 planets when Pluto was a planet way out there in the right-hand corner, and then it was discovered or decided that Pluto is not, in fact, big enough to qualify as a planet, so we went back to 8 planets. Pluto was deplaneted in 2006 after a pretty good run. And now we have scientists telling us that, in fact, forget about Pluto, but there is a planet 9 and a planet 10 out there. And this scientific paper published last year in Astronomical Journal explains why they believe that they have found a planet 10 out way, 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 way at the stretches of our own solar system, Planet 10 with John Worfen and the black lectroids and the red lectroids presumably on it. And they think that that could be this thing that they have identified. They can't see, but they detect it from gravity effects, Planet 10. So that's what I thought we might talk about. Can I ask you to welcome 2 smart young women who happen to be my nieces, Mae Madison and Lily Madison. Come on out. Come on out. Have a seat, girls. So what we want to do, and not for very long, is to have a conversation, all of us, about some of the ideas that this totally ridiculous and wonderful, but not entirely crazy movie has raised. And so I'm going to ask them some questions. They'll have some questions for me, for you. I'll have some questions for you. And at the end of that, not very long from now, let's all be out of here by 9:30. We'll have the offering of the theories about the meaning of the watermelon. So, Mae, Lily, let me ask you first. Whoa. Is there really any science on screen in this movie? Do you see any science in this movie, or just silliness in science fiction?
I see some science when they're talking about the rock and how there's, you don't really know what's in the rock. There's only like a quadrillionth of the stuff that we know. And so I think that's pretty sciencey.
Yeah. Well, that is. I agree. That's real. That's real. The notion that there's more space than there is matter in an average atom or a hunk of granite.
Yeah,
Lily?
it's very hard to see the science when you first watch it, but I think we've watched it 3 times, and we're just starting to kind of pick out the science. When Penny's talking about the Big Bang and the Little Bang, I think there's probably some science behind that too.
Which parts of the movie do you think are somewhat realistic, could be actual, and which parts are completely ridiculous, impossible? Are there any parts of the movie that are, besides the science that you just mentioned, that are actually a little bit possible?
Gosh, trying to think. I don't know.
Well, I'm not quite sure, but there may be a Grover's Corner.
Grover's Mill? Grover's Mill. It is a real place. It's a real town in New Jersey. What about the idea that there are other forms of life in the universe, that there's something out there, like the lectroids, the red and the black lectroids, on Planet 10, or maybe not as close as Planet 10, but somewhere in the universe? What do you think? Do you think there could be other forms of life in the universe that we haven't seen, haven't met yet?
Well, I know that there's been a lot of talk about water on Mars, and that could potentially be a
Water
life,
on Mars, yeah.
could potentially be a life source.
Yeah, water is important, right. And when they find it, that raises their expectations. What about other planets on other star systems around the universe that are just far enough from their stars to have liquid water?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff out there. There's gotta be. I mean, I think that there's gotta be something else out there. I don't really, but yeah.
The numbers would suggest it, wouldn't they? The odds. You girls have some questions. And the reason that Lisa had the idea of bringing us together to do Science on Screen was because, I was in this theater a couple of months ago in connection with another movie, and the girls were here, and they were asking questions from the audience, and Lisa said, why don't we turn that into a Science on Screen thing? So, do you have some questions, maybe for them, that we can get some audience voices involved, or for me?
Yeah, I have one I talked about a little bit earlier about the rock that he was holding in the press conference, I think it was, and it's a 1 quadrillionth of it. Do you think that you could actually go through it? I mean, because there's only 1 quadrillionth of it that we know of, like electrons, and so I'm just wondering, what do you think about that?
It doesn't seem to me the craziest or the silliest or the most ridiculous part of the movie. Because we know that everything that's solid here is only seems solid to us because of the scale that we operate on, the size we are. We're bigger, much, much bigger than electrons or protons. And if we were the size of electrons and protons, then we could pass through atoms ourselves. It's not crazy to me. And the two parts of the movie that I think actually involved real science, real scientists doing real science, were when Emilio Lizardo tried to break through into the 8th dimension and smash through that wall because he had a terrible, inefficient oscillation overthruster back in 1938, and when Buckaroo drove through the mountain. Why did he drive through the mountain? He was not rescuing anybody. He was not doing rock and roll. He was not conquering anybody. He was not doing anything that was practical. He was doing it to find out if it was possible, driving through that mountain. So that's one of my favorite scenes because it's really, he's being a scientist at that point, just wants to find out what would happen. Is there an 8th dimension? And if we have the right kind of oscillation overthruster, can we get into it and see it? I want to get a few more voices into this, so I'll ask another question, and then you ask another question. But the question I have, and it's a quick and easy one, was, can anybody please tell me what that thing was that Buckaroo pulled off the crankshaft of the jet car? Thank you very much. A colonial tuna kit from the 8th dimension. All right. Okay. All right. I can go with that answer. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for the audience so we could kind of brainstorm it together. We were talking about going through a mountain. Do you think there would actually be potential in real life in a solid mountain?
Anybody out there want to respond to that? I'm hoping that you've drunk just enough wine maybe to get a little bit verbal. Is there somebody raising a hand? Yeah, right there. Yeah, please. Holler out. We have a microphone down here, but holler out an answer.
I think interdimensionally no, but a year or two ago, a study was published that found microbial life several miles beneath the surface of the Earth. So it can survive under pretty extreme conditions.
Several miles beneath the surface of the Earth. I think, did I also read something that there was microbial life found, maybe this is what you're talking about, in Jurassic siltstone?
Yeah, that also sounds plausible. There was one found that used in a really high arsenic-heavy environment, which is normally problematic because DNA requires phosphate instead of arsenic. So they're not super chemically compatible.
What about the Archeans? Still use phosphate for DNA. Yeah, you're right. That makes sense. You had a question, one of you, about Penny Pretty.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to know, does anyone out here think about Penny Pretty's name?
Penny Pretty's name. And I'll add to that, and I think this is maybe where you're going. Some critics have noted, and by some critics, I mean my wife and your Aunt Boppy. Some critics have noted that this is a very sexist movie, that Penny Pretty is pretty, and she's also the ultimate helpless, almost helpless damsel in distress in a nice pink dress. So is there any, do we just need to forgive this movie for that? Is there any redemption to this movie in terms of sexism in the characters of John Emdahl, played by Rosalind Cash, who is the black Electrode who does the hologram performance, or Senator Cunningham, who doesn't have a very big part, but at least, as the president says, at least someone around here has some balls. Or Mrs. Johnson, the enigmatic Mrs. Johnson, who runs the house that Buckaroo and the Hong Kong Cavaliers live in. Any? Penny Pretty saves the day. Please expound. She She has that riff at the press conference.
Yeah, I do. Oh, sorry, you can go.
Perfect too. Perfect Tommy. I mean, he's as sexist in that way too, right?
Perfect Tommy, yeah. He's just kind of there because he's perfect. Lewis Smith, the wonderful Lewis Smith. We're getting it slowly but surely, but slowly, right? Some, anyway. Who is it? Is it Jessica Chastain who has that role in Arrival? Yeah. So that is an interest, a much better role.
Yeah, and then I also want to talk about that too. I mean, she is like, Penny Pretty is her name, and it's kind of weird for me, but also she did kind of act pretty like assertive, and she was really confident with herself, which kind of surprised me, but also was really cool. And she did save the day, and she didn't like tell them where the overthruster was, and she didn't break at any time. And so even though her name is Penny Pretty, she still was like the toughest character in the movie, I think.
Also, didn't it seem like Ellen Barkin had a hell of a good time? I think she embraced that role, and they were lucky to have her. So the filmmakers who created Buckaroo Banzai, they created this jet car by welding together pieces of a Ford 350 truck and a Grand National stock car and a DC-3. And then they roared it at that mountain and through that mountain. So this is another of those, can somebody please tell me, questions. Given the fact that they did that, can somebody please tell me why they made their goggles for viewing the hologram out of bubble wrap? Please, somebody explain that. Maybe so. Maybe that was it. Maybe the budget was done. And you saw the advertisement, Buckaroo. You saw the advertisement for the sequel, Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. That was the one that never got made because this movie didn't make any money. And so this is what we have after 34 years. Girls, do you have one more question before I ask for people to come down and give their answers to the puzzle prize question? No? Okay, all right. Well, let's go to that then.
So we are inviting
We have
hordes of people to come down here and give
fabulous
you theories.
prizes. Fabulous
Please
prizes.
start the line here.
Somebody. All right. Katie Gaines.
I believe that watermelon represents refreshments for monkey boys.
Freshmen's for monkey boys. Okay. Was the watermelon in?
Stay up here. So once you've given your theory, we invite you to stay up here, and then the voting will happen.
Lance Craighead. Timothy Tate. Yes. Young man, come down.
I think it's supposed to act as a alien head to withstand the pressure.
To withstand the pressure? Okay. And it was in, come, stay with us. Okay, an alien head. My man.
So it's pretty obvious.
So it's the metric by which we measure whether or not we are about to go into the 10th dimension. It's tension.
It's tension. It's the metric. Okay. It's the metric of whether we're ready to go into the 10th dimension. Who else? Who else? Come on down, as Monty Hall would say. Yeah.
I think it is the barrier that we have between the atoms. Like, it's tough on the outside, but we don't really know what would be in the inside until we open it.
Very, very plausible. Tough on the outside and who knows what on the inside.
Yeah, so I think it's an egg that was laid by Big Booty.
A big bootay egg. Big bootay. Who else? Come on down. Come on down. Lance, Cindy, anybody else?
Come on down. I'm going to give my
We got time for a
my
couple
theory
of
right
more.
here. Okay, so I think that
Michael.
it's actually a really incredibly sharp system of knives, and it cuts the perfect, 25 slices of watermelon. It was between two things, right? And it goes...
Okay. You mean like the Pepito Pocket Fisherman advertisement, the dicer on late night
Yes,
TV?
if this was on QVC, it would have sold a lot.
Okay, all right, okay. Watermelon slicer.
Refreshments for monkey boys.
It was
Then refreshments for monkey boys.
it was between two things, for sure. Mike.
I think it's an oscillating overthruster hidden in there, and you need to take off your shoes and open it up with your feet.
Okay, all right. Now we're getting somewhere. Anybody else? Anybody else? Come on down. Cindy.
Well, I think it represents maybe curiosity. It's there, we're all saying why. So we're all here with the watermelon because we're not all there.
Okay. Stay with us, Cindy. Yes.
So did you guys notice it was between sort of a press? All right, has anyone ever worked in a lab before? So my guess is that the press wouldn't stay up on its own. And it's a lot easier to lift it up if there's a watermelon in there.
It's a press spacer. Okay, all right. Girls.
Maybe it represented the mountain because it's hard on the outside, and then when you get in, it's easier to get through.
Like the mountain. Yes, okay, I start to see a pattern. Yep, thank you.
I thought it was prize for Employee of the Month.
A prize for Employee of the Month at the Banzai Institute. Okay, all right. Anybody else? Any last ideas on this? Any last theories? Okay. Well, how do we decide? How can we possibly decide? Okay, let's have your applause. Come on, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Okay. Wow, okay. Elsie or Adele? Elsie. I think it's these two. I think it's, am I right? I think it's these two. Okay, so just by coincidence, our prize package has 2 items in it. One of which, I had a VHS copy of Buckaroo Banzai that was given to me back in 1986 by the producer, Sidney Beckerman, when I happened to meet him in Los Angeles through my agent. And I thought, oh, what a perfect thing, a VHS of Buckaroo Banzai, because nobody can play it unless they travel back in time. And I threw it away 3 years ago. But I still have, whoa! A VHS, a complete 5-movie VHS of the Alien Legacy, which you can play on your VHS. And we also have here a mint condition copy of Charles Darwin's Secret Transmutation Evolution notebooks from 1836 to 1844. Mint condition because I happen to have 2 copies, and this one I haven't scribbled all over. So this one will go to you. Okay. I think that Lisa McGrory has told me that for those of you who don't have to go home and get to bed and get up and go to school or wake up and go to a job and earn a living, if you have a little bit more time, the conversation will continue at the open range. But thank you so much for coming out tonight. And thank you to my nieces for partnering with me, Lily and Mae. Thank you. And thanks to Lisa. Let's go.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you, David, Lily, and Mae. This was fabulous. You look wonderful.